Hello, my soccer universe. My name is Roland, and this is Football Talk. The quarterfinals of the AFCON are in the book, and I don't want to call them disappointing, but yes, there were three that were rather one-sided, where the other team just didn't show up or were just overwhelmed by the might of the team that ended up winning. At least the last one really gave us an exciting match with 5 goals and plenty of drama in between there as well. And also some star power, which is pretty cool. And yes, the champions are out. Long live the new champions. Yes, we'll have a new champion, not in the terms that none of these teams have ever won the AFCON. All of these teams were previous AFCON winners. However, for instance, for Morocco, it's a long time ago. All the other ones are relatively recent. I think Nigeria in 2013, Egypt in 2010, and Senegal just won it in, I think, 22 in Cameroon. So they are the most recent one. Morocco is still, for the power that they are within Africa, is still waiting for a long time for a title. So with home field advantage and probably a whole system that works very well for Morocco already. I mean, the way they have revamped their footballing structure is quite impressive. The question is if the pressure of the home crowd will actually help or hinder the Moroccans. That remains to be seen. I have to say that the semifinal field, and we'll talk about the games and the semifinals a little bit later, but the semifinal field of the remaining teams is quite an interesting one. We have Senegal and Nigeria, both arguably sub-Saharan teams, at least West African teams, whereas Morocco and Egypt are definitely more in the Arabic, Northern African sphere, although Morocco is a border case and of course Senegal is also a border case. But yeah, it is all around the Sahara, the four semi-finalists, one of whom will win. I have to say though, when I look at the overall performances, it is quite interesting that I think it's Nigeria and Senegal who have had the most convincing ones. You can definitely say that Egypt and Morocco more rely on their stars, where Morocco probably has the deeper pool. Egypt really has some outstanding players, probably we might argue that, but purely by talent, Salah and Marmoush are just outstanding strikers. However, coaching is a little bit not quite matching up with that, where Morocco I think has a much more solid foundation, probably the star of the tournament already in Brahim Diaz, who has scored now in consecutive games. Every single game he has been the icebreaker more or less for Morocco, whereas Nigeria just bring the pure power of their offensive line, but the most solid team I think is Senegal, yet to concede a goal. And we will start of course with the review with the West African derby between Mali and Senegal. The biggest problem for Mali is that they cannot keep all the players on the field. For the third game in a row, they had a player sent off, which greatly hindered them. And this time around, they played against a much better team than they had in Tunisia in the round of 16. Senegal is a true force. Yes, the go-ahead goal was a lucky one. The goalie from Mali could not hold on to a ball and it falls onto the feet of Ndiaye, who puts it into the net. But there were chances for Senegal to double the lead for sure already before halftime, when Yves Bissouma is then sent off for a second yellow card. Yes, you might argue it was maybe a little bit nitpicky because it was in an action that led to a Senegal attack and it was then handed out later, but it was a second yellow card if you just look at it purely by the frame. And so it was that Mali again have to do it with a man less. The one thing that you have to give to Mali, even though they have not won a single game, and yes, in 3 games they had a man sent off, they had not lost up until that point either. So they are really hard fighting side that's always playing a little bit on the edge, a little bit too much on the edge, instead of also relying on their technical abilities that are undoubtedly there, but they focus more on their physical abilities. And I think this is probably a little bit to their detriment. I'm not saying that Mali in any way should have matched Senegal. Senegal are a much more mature and well-rounded team than Mali are. But I know with physicality you can overcome deficiencies technically, but if this is your only point that you can bring to the game, then most likely this is not gonna give it to you. This should be added on and it should be measured, and the measure is, I think, where Mali fell short. But as I said, even with the red card. Yes, at the beginning of the second half, Mali actually did create chances. I mean, one chance I can't remember. But they tried to get themselves back into the game, but it was then Senegal who just could not get it home. I mean, Sis had two great chances. I think laid on, they hit the post. There were chances there for Senegal to make the scoreline way more comfortable than it ended up being. But Senegal, again, move on, still no goal conceded, and are probably and should be considered rightfully, I think, one of the favorites for this tournament. But flowing a little bit under the water and also profiting probably from a little bit softer schedule when I look at all the other contenders, or at least all the other quarter finalists. Host Morocco then were the away team in Rabat against Cameroon. A Cameroon team that has surprised me, but that I also pointed out last time against South Africa that they were just ruthless in converting their chances, because South Africa were the better team at the beginning. And Cameroon had a hard time handling Morocco. In addition, Jamadeu had to come off with an injury, but Cameroon never could control the attacking might of Morocco. Not that Morocco were so overwhelming, but Morocco were better. Cameroon didn't have a shot on goal, I think, in the entire game. Morocco were that much better, and it's then a Kabi header that Brahim Diaz more or less with his lower body pushes over the line that provides the breakthrough. Then there were chances that were mostly off target, but Morocco had clear control of the game in the second half. I think a goal was disallowed, if I'm not misremembering that one, but it was then very late on that Sabari, after a free kick, a corner moved just a little bit inward, gets onto the ball, puts in the net to make it 2-0, and it could have been more. This was utter dominance. This was probably the most convincing performance by Morocco in this tournament. And yes, you can say, did Cameroon show up or did they not show up? It really feels they didn't show up, but maybe Morocco were really that much more settled. And with the little mighty midget, Brahim Diaz, they have a true difference maker. And I said it last time, I really miss him at Milan in a way, because he is one, when he is in form, he's really, really hard to stop. And at this AFCON, he is really hard to stop. I mean, there was no one so far that really could take him on and contain Brahim Diaz. And then you have it Al-Kabi, and a pretty dangerous striker up front as well. And, everything else works quite well. I think this Morocco team is just finding their rhythm. Maybe this will be enough to carry them to the final and maybe to the much wanted AFCON title. Because let's face it, I mean, since 1984, that's a darn long time. Now, to me, Sunday was always the more exciting day of this, but like Cameroon, Morocco, Algeria, Nigeria was never really a great game, because like Cameroon, Algeria could not handle the Nigerian might. That was an absolute surprise to me, especially when you looked in the stadium in Marrakesh. I mean, it was full with Algerian fans. Maybe that was the pressure on the Algerians, but this was absolutely crazy. How Nigeria did not lead at the halftime break was a little bit beyond me. I mean, there was one clearance by a guy from Borussia Dortmund. Name is not coming right now. Benzebaini was his name, cleared it just off the line. I mean, just a split second later, and this will count as a goal. I think they hit at one point the post. It was really dominant by Nigeria. I think Adams had a one-on-one with the goalie, put it over the goal, and Algeria definitely were probably thinking, we're lucky to get out of this one. However, right after the half, a cross comes in and Osimhen heads it in again. Benzebaini cannot decide. Does he want to go challenge Osimhen? Does he want to defend the line? Lucas Zidane is caught in the middle of nowhere, as he has already been previously on the chance that was cleared by Benzebaini. And so Osimhen just can head it relatively easy in the empty net in the 47th minute. So Nigeria finally have to break through, and then it is again Osimhen. They intercept the ball comes to Osimhen, who sees Adams, takes it around the keeper into the end, and 57th minute, 2-0 Nigeria. Adams himself should have made it 3 here, then a more or less open net where he then just hit the post. The only shot on goal was for Bebouma Dia, the scorer of the winning goal in the final against Senegal in 2019. But that went so far off that you could really tell this was not Algeria's day. It was not a good performance by Algeria, and Nigeria completely deservedly move on. Probably the best forward line in the tournament, with Adams, Lookman and Osimhen. One that needs to be contained. With Nigeria, you always have to wonder about discipline. But of course, there's a bigger story there as well, that they almost didn't play this game because, again, it was they didn't get the proper payments that were promised. And it's not that the players want to get extra remunerated. Most of them don't necessarily need the money. They want it for the staff. And so there have been a battle with the federation all through, and it's so typical Nigeria. And this is something that is holding Nigeria back. Now, it also came out, I was not aware that when they did not qualify for the World Cup, there was a similar fight within the squad. It's just not a good environment. It is. Nigeria should be an absolute powerhouse with the talent, with the population that they have. They are still a great team, but they should be even more dominant than they are. But it's the federation that is holding them back. It's the politics behind. And this is something that plagues almost all of Africa, and is actually a little bit sad to see. So, as I said, the first three quarterfinals all were rather one-sided, and yes, you could have enjoyed Senegal's play and cohesiveness, Morocco's star power up front here and there, and also Nigeria. I mean, plenty of chances created. It was just not an exciting watch. We got exciting then between Egypt and the Côte d'Ivoire. And I have been bigging up the Côte d'Ivoire in my previous episode. Well, that didn't go well because Marmouche in the 4th minute is already 1-on-1 with the goal. He makes it 1-0. Now he made the chance that he didn't do in the round of 16, I think, when they ousted Benin just in overtime. And that really set the tone for the remainder of the match. Now the Côte d'Ivoire had to come out and actually get back into the game while leaving themselves open. And it was Egypt was a slightly the better team, even though the Côte d'Ivoire did have their chances. But it was never really something, absolutely tangible. And then in the 32nd minute, it's a free kick in that Rabia. Oh no, it was a corner in. And I want to even say by Salah. Yes, a Salah corner that Rabia then gets his head on, and it loops over the goalie into the net. And at that point, you actually had to really fear that this might get very lopsided again, because Egypt did have the chances to make 3-0, because now the Ivorians were opening themselves up. But they got back into the goal, and it's again an Egyptian that scores when a cross in is deflected by Fatou into his own net. I mean, it was shot cross somewhere in between, but it was game on again, and this is exactly what the game needed. Yes, assured and sends Salah in the 52nd minute, and it's 3-1 for Egypt. So everything really pointing to the Pharaohs already. But then Doué, after a clearance on the line by the goalie, gets it back into the net. 73rd minute, it's 3-2 again. But then Egypt held really, really tight. There was only one half chance by the Ivorians, but the danger was always there. And that made it at least a little bit more exciting. I think this was undoubtedly the best match of them all, of the quarterfinals. And as I said, the Ivorians are dethroned and the Egyptians move on. And now they will actually face Senegal in the semifinal. And let's talk about these semifinals next. So we already said that the quarterfinal lineup was great. I think a semifinal lineup is probably even juicier in that sense. I mean, of course, we have now 4 current African powerhouses in there. As I say, 4 very different flavors. Senegal, I think, have to be considered the huge favorites over Egypt. Egypt rely on Mohamed Salah, Marmouche up front, and that they have good enough of a defensive structure that they will not get into trouble. However, Senegal is a much better team, and Sadio Mane, who was the big star when they won it in Cameroon the last time, where they beat Egypt in the final, is not as much of a factor as he used to be. These are all players from Premier League, from Ligue 1 and so on that form a really, really good team, a very cohesive team, and they still have Koulibaly on the back holding it together. To me, Senegal, and they have been playing all the matches in Tangier, so there's another advantage that Senegal do have. Whereas Egypt now have to go from the south of the country way up to the north. So definitely favorite Senegal there. Nigeria and Morocco for me is much, much harder to call. Again, Morocco are the technically away team. We'll have Morocco's support against Nigeria. For me, this is all about how much can Morocco contain the Nigerian superstar strikers. Lookman and Osimhen are in really, really good form. Adams is a good supplemental offensive force as well. Whereas I think Morocco have a much more solid structure overall. However, not this superstar power. And yes, Brahim Diaz is the exception there, and he will be the one that needs to be contained by Nigeria. So I think that's probably of the two will probably be the more interesting to watch, although Senegal-Egypt is definitely, mouth-watering, but it doesn't have the Liverpool connection that it had. And, Senegal-Egypt, there was actually, there's not only there, but also in the World Cup qualifiers with all the semifinals and the crazy laser gate and so on in the penalty shootout. There was plenty of stuff happening. This is a true rivalry between these two nations at this very moment already. Nigeria and Morocco is probably set to become one. Nigeria, I repeat myself, is a team that is surprising me in the sense that they didn't play good World Cup qualifying, but now when it goes for a trophy, already the last time around they probably should have won the AFCON. I mean, it was a miracle that the Ivory Coast did do that. They want to make up for that, but now they have to play the hosts, and that will not be easy. That I can also say. So this is definitely a more interesting one. Also, scheduling wise, so far it was all at least Central European 5 and 8 o'clock. Now they moved it an hour back, so it is 6 and 9 o'clock on Wednesday. At least this is what I saw now. As I said, I was a little bit surprised about that, but so be it. Who will play in the final? Now, the one thing that AFCON is doing smartly, both semifinals are played on the same day. So you don't have the disadvantage of one semifinal being played after, because the second one usually is at a disadvantage. It's also that the semifinal where the winner does have to travel is played first, so even travel time is probably a little bit mitigated. Rabat, Casablanca, where the final two games are played, are relatively close together. So travel should be relatively easy towards the final or the third place playoff. Who do you have? Who will play in the final? Who will play in Rabat for the AFCON trophy on the 18th of January? That's my big question to you. Please let me know in the comments. Did you enjoy the quarterfinals, and what semifinal are you looking forward to most? In any case, I have to say, while I like that the favorites are going on, we're getting big name matchups, I'm still a little bit underwhelmed by this AFCON. I think previous AFCONs were a bit crazier. But on the other side, I just have a feeling that this might get better the longer the tournament lasts. And having it played now in a climate zone that is very close to Southern Europe, I think also helps the bigger teams a little bit. And that makes it interesting for sure. You also will see on my main channel a AFCON jersey review popping up relatively soon. So if you're interested in that, please check that one out as well. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a subscription, give me a review, leave a comment, and I will talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye!